Smajo Beso saw the war in Bosnia through a child's eyes. He was 6 years old when Serbian soldiers came to his town. His family escaped capture 14 times. Eventually, with some luck, they managed to make contact through the Red Cross and escape. He now lives in the northeast of England and teaches at the University of Newcastle. He joins us now from there. Smajo, thanks so much for coming in on our show. As a survivor of the Bosnian War, how do you feel today while we are commemorating the 25th anniversary of Srebrenica genocide?
Hi, and thank you for having me and giving me a chance to speak to you today. Although my family is not from Srebrenica, today is an incredibly difficult time, especially with COVID-19 and us not being able to commemorate in the way that we would usually do so. Srebrenica is a symbol of all of our suffering. You know, when more than 8,000 men and boys were murdered, but the Bosnian genocide and what happened in Bosnia culminated on the 11th of July. You know, this started as early as 1992 with mass killing and rape and so on. And when Mladic entered Srebrenica in July 1995, he said it was time to take revenge against the Turks. To Bosnian Serb extremists, we were all Turks, we were all Muslims. And for me personally, what always fascinated me was this idea of how can friends and neighbors and people that we grew up with, how can they so easily accept an ideology that described Muslims as disease and vermin and so on, and became completely normal and acceptable behavior to kill and rape, to do the most awful things, and then to go back to your own family and friends at the end of the day. Because sometimes what happened in Bosnia is described as ancient hatreds, or these people are described as monsters. Yes, they became monsters, but it's important to remember that before the war, you know, these were good, normal, ordinary people. And somehow they accepted an ideology and they started doing the most awful, monstrous things. And today is a reminder for me personally and my family of what can happen if we let that sort of language and rhetoric take over. And the worrying thing is we just see it in Europe happening. We see it all over Europe, that same divisive language happening. I was in southern Bosnia, as you said, where we actually suffered at the hands of Bosnian Croat extremists. And we had family that were killed and raped, and we were forced from our homes.
And Smajo, I want to ask you here, you know, we are still, hundreds of families are still searching for the remains of their loved ones 25 years later. How difficult is it for them to have any kind of closure 25 years later?
I mean, speaking to the mothers that are having to piece and bury a finger or a single bone, I mean, that must be an incredibly difficult decision to make. But again, speaking from my personal experience, we still have family members that are missing, you know, more than 25, 26, 27 years after they were killed. And there are times when you think, well, they might be alive somewhere. You kind of cling on to that hope. But really, you just wish to find something. You wish to get something to give yourself a sense of closure. For me, again, personally, from my experience, during the war, we were in Mostar and we were under siege by Croatians on one side and Serbs on the other. And we were staying with my auntie, my mom's sister, who was actually killed when Croatians used a crop plane and indiscriminately just dropped bombs all over Mostar. The way that my family has tried to find closure, because the people that are responsible for this are still living freely in Croatia, and we know that. But the way that my family tried to find closure and meaning from this during the war, during that time, was to teach us about the importance of understanding the difference between good and bad, because it could have been so easy to tell us, and the most soothing and the easiest thing for my mom to do at the time, and my grandparents who carried my auntie out of the house on a blanket was to tell us that all Croatians are exactly the same, that we should direct our anger at them, that we should hate all of them. So that's how my family has tried to do that. My grandma just passed away a couple of months ago, and she never got to see justice.
Right.
So there are so many families like that across Bosnia, and the chances are, the longer we go away on from the war, we'll never get to find our loved ones, because there are actually more secondary than primary mass graves, because they were constantly buried and reburied as a way of concealing them. So this was a systematic operation that just makes it incredibly difficult for people to find their loved ones and actually have closure.
Smajo Beso, thanks so much for that live for us from Newcastle. Smajo, thank you so much for sharing your story with us here at TRT World. I do appreciate that.